Hello, everyone. Welcome to episode 20 of Conversing on Africa's Peace, a podcast focused on African Union's Peace and Security Council and key related issues, produced every month by Amani Africa Media and Research Services. It's Sion again from Amani Africa. Today, I have my colleague Hani joining me on this episode. Hani, say hello to our listeners.
Hello, everyone. Thanks for having me.
So, as we do the podcast for the month of June, Republic of Uganda has taken over the role of chairing the Peace and Security Council. The program of work adopted under Uganda's chairship seems to have a balance between thematic and country-specific sessions, as compared to earlier months, which is quite interesting. Before we delve into the details of June's program of work, let's, as usual, briefly reflect back on PSC's engagement during the previous month. As we all recall, Tanzania chaired the PSC during the previous month of May, and this month was specifically interesting for the PSC as it was dedicated to the celebration of its 20th anniversary, or as it framed it, PSC at 20. Accordingly, the PSC ensured it hosted and that it dedicated particular theme for each week of the month, marking, the 20th anniversary since its operationalization in 2004. But in any case, having captured that, I think it would be relevant given, the introduction of some major changes to the program of work in the course of May. I think it would perhaps interest our listeners, Hani, to reflect on some of these changes. So why don't you walk us through them very briefly?
Thanks, Sion. As you've mentioned, there were several changes to the monthly program of work for May. Mm-hmm. It had initially envisaged to have a session on the situation in Chad. That was one of their first sessions. And then they also had a field mission planned to Tigray and a session on the report of the field mission to Tigray, which were postponed. And then specifically on ATMIS, they had initially put it on the agenda and then reinstated it to a later date. So there was a bit of a back and forth there on the post-ATMIS session. And they also postponed the inaugural PSC subcommittee on sanctions. So these were the changes that we saw in May. But regardless of the changes, there were sessions that took place, and two of them primarily focused on the celebration and the anniversary of the PSC at 20, and then three sessions that considered country and thematical sessions. So for the PSC sessions that focused on the anniversary, one of them was on stocktaking the implementation of the protocol, establishing the AU Peace and Security Council article by article. So this was an interesting session as Amani Africa participated and presented and provided our recommendations on how the PSC can stocktake the implementation of the protocol. In addition, member states highlighted some of their concerns and their interest in how the protocol should be better established. This included more power sharing and enhancing engagement with RECs and REMs, as well as international institutions. In addition to the stocktaking of the protocol, another session that the PSC held that commemorated the anniversary was a colloquium held at the heads of state and government level in Tanzania. This session focused on the next 2 decades of peace and security and what we would like to see for peace and security in the next 2 decades. And some of the things that may have been addressed is the increasing capacity of the AU peace and security architectures, particularly PAPS, the PSC, and other AU organs mandated for the promotion of peace, security, and stability in Africa. And over the years, we've seen the PSC focusing on more holistic approach to conflict. So my guess is that they would also include, in the next few decades, they want to focus on a holistic approach to peace and security, focusing on global security issues, cybersecurity threats, health security issues as well as the thematical areas that we've always covered on terrorism and the manifestation of violent extremism. So these are some of the things that may be included in the decisions. And as usual, unconstitutional changes of government is a big topic for the continent right now. So that will probably be a focus moving forward in the next decade. For country-specific situations, they also considered the report on post-ATMIS assessment. The report is not finalized yet, so there wasn't an outcome document as a result. In addition to that, another country-specific sessions they looked at was political transitions in Burkina Faso, Guinea, Mali, Niger, and Gabon. So that was that for May.
Yes, thanks a lot, Hani, for that look back and for reflecting on the various sessions that took place in May. So looking ahead, we have 7 substantive agenda items which are planned to be considered by the Council. So we could perhaps reflect on some of these. Why don't I hand over to you, Hani, to walk us over perhaps the first 2 agenda items planned for the month?
Yeah, so the first agenda item is artificial intelligence. As
Timely
we
issue.
have been in the era of artificial intelligence the past couple of years, it's really important for the Peace and Security Council to address this and how it impacts the continent. But this session actually comes from an Executive Council decision that was made in 2023, which endorsed the conceptual framework of the Continental Artificial Intelligence Strategy. And this was produced by the Special Technical Committee on Communications and Information Communication Technology. So the Executive Council at that time requested for the AU Commission to expedite the development of a continental strategy on artificial intelligence. And since then, the Commission has been establishing a working group consisting of member states and Pan-African organizations to kind of facilitate this process of creating a strategy. And they've also started online consultations with various multilateral stakeholders in April 2024. So that's the first session.
Interesting developments for the PSC to reflect on.
Yeah.
So the following session after the reflections on AI would be actually a session which has just recently been added following the revision of the program of work. So this will be a discussion on UN Security Council Resolution 2719, which was very recently adopted in December of 2023. So, since the adoption of this landmark resolution, this will be the first time for the Council to actually be convening a session, which, would be dedicated to a reflection on this particular instrument. So, of course, despite some misgivings regarding the process which led to the adoption of this resolution, 2719 has been widely welcomed as a very critical framework for enabling financing of AU-led peace support operations through UN assessed contributions. While the adoption of this resolution is, definitely, as we can all agree, a very positive step forward and also a welcome development for AU PSOs, we can all say that there is, much within the resolution that requires a bit more unpacking in order to foster common understanding at the UN and AU level, which is, an essential step for enabling the effective implementation of this resolution. We may all have assessed from social media interactions, the week before the previous one, a UN delegation visited Addis to kickstart meeting of the AU-UN task force or team on UN Security Council Resolution 2719. This meeting was centrally aimed at, developing some sort of a skeleton for a roadmap that would then enable implementation of Resolution 2719. And this meeting essentially afforded, the opportunity for the counterparts to discuss in some details the various provisions which are incorporated in this resolution. Aside from that, there have been some questions from various corners regarding the first situation with respect to which this resolution would be utilized.
Somalia has come up.
Definitely, some have brought up Somalia or AU's post-ATMIS engagement in Somalia as, a potential first case scenario in which this resolution could be implemented. But then again, there may be some aspects of operationalizing the resolution, such as, framing a broader roadmap or a broader kind of formula for its implementation, which may, definitely need to proceed discussions on its actual utilization in specific cases. So for the PSC, it will likely be of interest to reflect on some of these key developments and also to reflect on the best ways to pave the way for implementing this resolution and having its actual realization in specific cases in Africa and the deployment of AU peace support operations. So having said that, maybe Hani.
Other thematical sessions I think that will be covered for the upcoming month is a session on humanitarian assistance in Africa, which is being convened in the context of World Refugee Day, which is commemorated on the 20th of June. They also had a session on transnational organized crime that they initially replaced with the 2719 UN resolution. But that's it for thematical engagements. For country-specific sessions, we have very hot topics this month. The session on Somalia and post-ATMIS preparations is one session. There's also another session on Sudan, a meeting at the heads of state level, and a field mission to South Sudan. So for post-ATMIS, the PSC has convened on ATMIS 4 out of the 6 months of this year. As ATMIS is nearing its third phase drawdown end of June, the session will most likely address the recent report that was produced by the EU Commission, reflecting on the post-ATMIS security arrangements. As I said earlier, the report was not ready, so they hadn't discussed it in the last session, so this will be at a time for them to reconvene and engage both the report as well as the processes for next phase of the drawdown. As we have seen in the past, most of the drawdowns have had postponements. Both of them had 2 postponements, the first one and the likelihood of another postponement might be discussed during the next meeting. However, I don't know how that will look, considering that the ATMIS exit is set for December 2024 and it's only 6 months from now, so it will be difficult for the AU to postpone another round of withdrawal for this month. So that's something that the PSC will debate and discuss during their session. On Sudan, the PSC is expected to meet at the heads of state level. As I said, there's been a lot of movement on the situation in Sudan over the past couple of weeks. Egyptian government had announced that they were planning on hosting a conference for Sudanese political forces at the end of June. There is also a convening of political actors in Addis. The coordination of civil democratic forces had a convening here in Addis last week. This is also supposed to be the first attempt of the AU high-level panel coordinating the first phase of political dialogue. That's supposed to happen in the first week of June, based off of the last communique that they released. So these are some of the things that the PSC might consider. In addition to that, we have seen efforts to restart the Jeddah process. However, it's coming to a pause as we have seen the refusal of the Sudanese army to engage with the US or the Jeddah process at all. So these recent developments, we can foresee that the session will focus on that. The session will also provide an opportunity for the high level to engage with the heads of state as they have done previously with ambassadors. And another issue that might come up is the recent decision for the PSC to investigate the atrocities in Darfur. The session may also discuss the best pathways to investigate for the whole country, atrocities that have been committed across the country since the onset of the war, and looking at ways to consolidate the varying mechanisms and the varying processes that have been underway to end this conflict but have not been successful. So that's it on Sudan. On South Sudan, it's only 6 months left to the elections. The field visit will focus on addressing the limited implementation of the transitional tasks ahead of the elections. I would also look at the capacity of the key electoral institutions in ensuring credible, free and fair elections. Based off previous decisions, the PSC may also look to see the delivery of equipment to prepare the institutions for election. They had requested to be delivered last time, so this might be an opportunity for them to see for firsthand if those equipments have been delivered.
All right, thanks a lot, Hani, for that reflection. So, of course, there will also be a specific session dedicated for the consideration of this field visit to South Sudan that you have just reflected on. So, hopefully, there will be some actionable ways forward to enable South Sudanese actors to take forward completion of pending tasks and pave the way for the elections to be conducted in December of this year. Aside from that, just to briefly highlight that the thematic session on refugees, IDPs, and humanitarian assistance in Africa will be held at the ministerial level. I think this is very relevant and key at this moment in time, given the kind of dynamics and humanitarian aspects on the ground that we are seeing, especially with respect to specific country situations such as Sudan that we have just reflected on. So it does offer the opportunity for the PSC to also reflect on how it can engage conflicting parties towards, paving the way for access to humanitarian assistance, something that a lot of humanitarian actors are struggling with on the ground currently. So having highlighted that brings us to the end of another episode. We wish Uganda a very fruitful month as it takes the chairship for June 2024, and we wish everyone taking part in the work of the PSC productive discussions on the important topics outlined briefly here today. We are happy to encourage our listeners to dig deeper into the PSC's agenda, as well as the analytical work that we produce, Amani Africa is also appreciative of the support of its institutional partners in the production of our insights on the provisional program of work of the PSC each month, and we believe that this podcast is a useful accompaniment to our work. Before we go, as usual, we would like to wish the following African states happy National Days of celebration in June. We have Mozambique on the 25th of June, Madagascar 26th of June, Djibouti 27th of June, Seychelles 29th of June, and Democratic Republic of Congo on 30th of June. Let me also thank our listeners for joining us for this month's edition of Conversing on Africa's Peace podcast, a podcast produced monthly by Amani Africa to provide brief highlights on the monthly program of work of the AU Peace and Security Council. We hope you have a great month and a productive year. We will be back next month to consider the PSC's agenda for July 2024. Until then, goodbye. We wish you all peace and prosperity.